CBS reports the homosexuals will continue in a moment.
There is a growing concern about homosexuals in society, about their increasing visibility. The average homosexual, if there be such, is promiscuous. He is not interested in nor capable of a lasting relationship like that of a heterosexual marriage.
Homosexuality is, in fact, a mental illness which has reached epidemiological proportions.
I was wondering if you think that there are any, quotes, happy homosexuals for whom homosexuality would be, in a way, their best adjustment to life.
The fact that somebody is homosexual, a true obligatory homosexual, automatically rules out the possibility that he will remain happy for long.
We are moving from gay pride to gay politics. Gay politics.
For someone of my generation, it sounds a bit preposterous. Political power for homosexuals? But those predictions are already coming true. In this report, we'll see how the gays of San Francisco are using the political process to further their own special interest. What we'll see is the birth of a political movement and the troubling questions it raises for the 80s, not only for San Francisco, but for other cities throughout the country.
Hi, I'm Stephen Capsuto. I study the history of LGBTQ images on American television, and today we're going to look back at two early CBS News documentaries that aired in prime time. One from 1967 called The Homosexuals, and one from 1980 called Gay Power, Gay Politics. Filmed just 13 years apart, the two documentaries reflect two completely different eras. 1967 was 2 years before the Stonewall riots and before the proliferation of gay liberation groups. When The Homosexuals aired, homosexuality in the U.S. was officially on the books as a crime and as a supposedly dangerous and terrifying psychiatric illness. By the mid-60s, there was already a political movement to promote our rights, the homophile movement, but it was far smaller than the later gay liberation movement and was generally unknown to the public, as seen in this clip from the documentary.
Well, I'm a country boy, I guess, because I couldn't believe this. I mean, I didn't know this was a problem over here, or at least I didn't think anybody'd have a sign out about it.
Sex between people of the same sex was a jailable offense in 49 of the 50 U.S. states, and that 50th state, Illinois, had only recently decriminalized it. By contrast, 1980 was very different. By the time Gay Power, Gay Politics aired, we were no longer officially mentally ill, and more than 20 U.S. states had decriminalized our lives. So in many ways, a much better world than 1967, even though in 1980 we were still criminals in most of the U.S. Another change was that by 1980, besides the gay liberation groups that had exploded onto the scene starting in 1969...
Oh, this is definitely the Marriage Bureau, but it's been taken over by the Gay Activist Alliance.
There were now also professionalized organizations like the National Gay Task Force and the Gay Rights National Lobby, and that combination, that 1-2 punch of in-your-face grassroots activism on the one hand and more corporate-looking sit-and-negotiate types on the other hand, can be a very effective political combination. These two one-hour documentaries both claimed to be about homosexuals or gay people, but they really only dealt with the people who the news media thought mattered, which is to say, white men and mostly middle to upper class white men. So right out of the gate, they were excluding most of the people they claimed to be talking about. Because if you exclude women and you exclude people of color, that's over half the community. And the two shows had a couple of major things in common. One, well, they were biased as hell. And two, they aired in the pre-internet era when televised images mattered a lot. TV was one of the main ways the public learned about the broader world, and it was a time when the vast majority of Americans thought they didn't know any gay or bisexual people. So yes, the images mattered and the bias mattered. So let's look at these two specials in order. It's hard today to imagine what an absolutely taboo topic same-sex desire was 60 years ago. First of all, as happens with many minority groups, most of what the general public was sure they knew about us was both frightening and wildly inaccurate, especially the then pervasive notion that queer people were supposedly emotionally unstable and violent and prone to harm children. And the fact that those myths were so entrenched explains a lot about public attitudes at the time.
In preparing this broadcast, CBS News commissioned a survey by the Opinion Research Corporation into public attitudes toward homosexuality. We discovered that Americans consider homosexuality more harmful to society than adultery, abortion, or prostitution. The majority of Americans favor legal punishment, even for homosexual acts performed in private between consenting adults.
Homosexuality was also officially a crime and a mental illness in the 1960s, and I can already hear some of you asking, what about bisexuality? Was bisexuality also considered a mental illness? Yeah, the medical experts considered it a less severe case of the same disease, sort of the sexual equivalent of a mild cold, like the one I'm fighting off right now. It was all ridiculous. Anyway, tons of people in the mid-60s felt that mentioning homosexuality on TV at all was disgusting, regardless of whether the discussion was positive or negative. So it was really controversial in 1964 when CBS announced plans for America's first primetime network documentary on this topic. CBS News spent several years producing The Homosexuals, which became a cause célèbre for its long delays and constant rewrites. The original outline that CBS had approved was even more lurid than the eventual show. But as CBS News producer Bill Peters worked on the film, he learned more about the subject, and the rough cut that he submitted was much more gay-friendly than the network was expecting. And CBS didn't like that one bit. Peters' original unaired version included quite a few relatively happy, self-accepting gay men. In fact, all through that rejected version of the documentary, the film kept cutting back to this group of 5 gay men who had never met before, sitting at a dinner table with a reporter just talking about their lives and what it was like to be gay in mid-20th century America. And that approach makes sense, right? Because the only real experts on our lives are us. I mean, you want to know what it's like to be an astronaut? You ask an astronaut and no one else. You want to know what our lives are like? You talk to us. What you hopefully wouldn't do is what the media generally did back then, which is to hold up as the supposed experts about us ostensibly heterosexual psychiatrists, psychologists, sociologists, lawyers, clergy, vice squad cops, and so on, who all talked about us in the third person. No, you want the experts, you talk to us. And that's largely the approach that Bill Peters took. But CBS executives wanted more emphasis on the words of sickness theory psychiatrists and psychologists, and they felt that the self-accepting gay men made gay people seem too human, I guess. It was widely rumored that at that point CBS executives just wanted to cancel the show entirely, but there had already been too much press and publicity and it would have looked cowardly. So they brought in a new producer, Harry Morgan, to salvage their investment. The final broadcast includes only 10 minutes of the Bill Peters film. For instance, all that dinner table conversation was reduced to just 24 seconds of silent B-roll footage with an announcer speaking over it. These men were literally silenced and talked over. Instead, the then heads of CBS News preferred segments like this one, featuring a 27-year-old man hiding behind a potted plant.
He was unable to hold a job because of his inability to contain his homosexual inclinations. He's been in jail 3 times for committing homosexual acts. If he is arrested once more, he faces the possibility of life prison.
I know that inside now I'm sick. I'm not sick just sexually. I'm sick in a lot of ways. Immature, childlike. And the sex part of it is a symptom, like a stomach ache is a symptom of who knows what.
Right before the broadcast, CBS insisted on further last-minute edits to make 2 of the happy gay men sound less happy. And yes, the show does include reasonably good remarks from some gay people themselves, notably from Jack Nichols of the Mattachine Society of Washington, who was using talking points prepared for him by Frank Kameny.
What do you think caused your sexual orientation? Have you thought about it?
I have thought about it, but it really doesn't concern me very much. I never would imagine if I had blonde hair that I would worry about what genes and what chromosomes caused my blonde hair.
And remarks by Hal Call of the Mattachine Society of San Francisco.
The laws which forbid certain types of private consenting sexual behavior among adults need to be changed so that what adults do willingly in private is their own affair.
And we even heard from Frank Kameny himself.
Every American citizen has the right to be considered by his government on the basis of his own personal merits as an individual. Certainly some homosexuals are poor risks. This is no possible excuse for penalizing all homosexuals.
In addition, several prominent people on the show, not identified as gay or bisexual, argued for a change in the laws, including Judge James Braxton Craven of the Federal District Court in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Is there any public purpose served by a possible 60-year maximum or even 5-year minimum imprisonment of the occasional or one-time homosexual without treatment? And if so, what is it? Are homosexuals twice as dangerous to society as second-degree murderers?
But it was the mental health professionals, Dr. Charles Socarides and Dr. Irving Bieber, yammering about how sick we all were, who most viewers in 1967 probably would have considered the true experts. And I've got to wonder how seriously the public took the gay speakers on the show, no matter how eloquent they were, because, after all, gay people were officially considered sick, and anything they said in their own defense was often dismissed as, oh, that's just your mental illness talking. So I have a lot of admiration for these people who were doing activism in that really repressive era. Many years later, in the 90s, the host of this documentary, Mike Wallace, gave an interview to Edward Allwood for Ed's wonderful book, Straight News, Gays, Lesbians, and the News Media. In the interview, Wallace admitted that in the 60s he really did believe all of that gay people were sick, unstable, unable to form intimate relationships, and so on. Looking back, he said, quote, "That is, God help us, what our understanding of the homosexual lifestyle was a mere 25 years ago, because nobody was out of the closet and because that's what we heard from doctors." But to his credit, he added, "I should have known better." The documentary ended with Wallace giving this summary in voiceover, over a freeze frame of the final interview subject who appeared only in silhouette.
I do love my wife as much as I'm capable of loving another person.
The dilemma of the homosexual. Told by the medical profession he is sick. By the law that he's a criminal. Shunned by employers, rejected by heterosexual society. Incapable of a fulfilling relationship with a woman, or, for that matter, with a man. At the center of his life, he remains anonymous, a displaced person, an outsider.
By 1980, when CBS aired Gay Power, Gay Politics, the network's narrative about us had shifted from sickness to threat.
What kind of people will use this sort of thing? Is it the lunatic fringe of the gay community?
No, it's everybody. It's bankers, lawyers, doctors. We sell to all types of clientele.
He is your slave. That is correct. He's my property. And do you accept that?
Yes.
So what's the message today?
Message is, look out. Here we come.
At the beginning of Gay Power, Gay Politics, broadcast in 1980, Harry Reasoner promised to show viewers the quote-unquote troubling questions that gay people's participation in democracy raised, not just for San Francisco, he said, but for cities and towns all across the U.S. The implicit question that the show posed to viewers in, let's say, Des Moines was this: will gay equality cause such horrors and social breakdown to spread to my town? And the implied answer seemed to be yes. The show defined the main goal of the gay rights movement as a demand for, quote, absolute sexual freedom, end quote. To the producers, sexual freedom apparently didn't mean the right to live with dignity or to not have to look over your shoulder all the time worrying you're going to be fired or arrested or kicked out of a university or lose your housing because someone or other didn't like your sexual orientation. No, the implication was that the types of sexual abandon that characterized some segments of late 70s gay San Francisco somehow went hand in hand with gay rights in general. The show insinuated repeatedly that the push for gay political power was, to a large extent, about things like sadomasochism and the right to have sex in public places where kids might see it. And the show cast queer people as a kind of political mafia in San Francisco who it was not safe to cross.
I want the television cameras to press focus on us and look at our numbers. And I want every bigot to look at our numbers. Look at us. Look at how many of us.
The numbers. What the mayor hadn't yet comprehended was the meaning of the sheer numbers of homosexuals here. She didn't yet realize that no politician could safely criticize these people. That soon, she would have to recognize them as the new power brokers in this changing American city.
And again, it seemed to warn that public sex and deaths caused by S&M could easily invade your town too if the gays got their way. While the documentary claimed to be about gay influence in the recent San Francisco election, instead of taking a serious look at queer voting blocs or campaign contributions or lobbying, CBS focused on glory holes, BDSM, and public cruising.
For the average person, it may not be dangerous to go into this park. But when we came here with our camera crew, a group of gay men surrounded us and forced us to leave. A week later, we came back without our crew, but with a home movie camera. This is what we found. From sunup to sundown, men everywhere. Hundreds of them coming to this park each day for public sex.
And they even showed children who lived near Buena Vista Park to reinforce the tired notion that queer people, implicitly all queer people everywhere, pose a moral threat to children. Now, the reporters never clarified what any of this had to do with gay people participating actively in democracy. I mean, no reporter would ever insinuate that the existence of heterosexual kink, or heterosexual hedonism, or even straight sex in public places makes straight people's participation in democracy suspect. And since queer people of various kinds made up about 15% of San Francisco's population back then, something obviously not true of other major cities, much less small towns, why wouldn't we expect San Francisco's elected officials to consider those constituents' needs? That's unremarkable. It's how democracy is supposed to work, but it was made to look insidious. One thing that surely did influence the producers' attitudes was the White Night riot in San Francisco, which happened in May of 1979, a few weeks before CBS's George Kreil and Grace Dieckhaus showed up in the city. In a nutshell, here's what happened. In November 1978, Harvey Milk, a San Francisco city supervisor, which is to say, city council member, who was the city's first openly gay elected official and a huge hero to the community, was shot dead in cold blood, along with Mayor George Moscone, who was a straight ally to our community. They were both murdered by former city supervisor Dan White, who was known for, among other things, his vehement anti-gay rhetoric. Now, back then, murders of queer people were not super rare, and Harvey Milk had even talked about the possibility that he might someday be assassinated. There was also a long history in the United States of police often sympathizing with perpetrators rather than the victims when queer people were killed. And in this case, many cops did seem to side with the murderer, who was a former San Francisco cop himself. Also in that era, and well into the 90s, there was a long history of courts in the United States handing down extremely lenient sentences in such cases, as if to say that queer people kind of deserve to be killed anyway. But San Francisco being San Francisco, a lot of queer San Franciscans hoped and trusted that the punishment in this case would fit the crime, and it did not at all. Dan White was given an extremely short prison sentence, probably much shorter than it would have been if he had killed only the mayor. And, after centuries of queer people being expected to put up with every kind of violent crime against us without fighting back, and knowing that the courts and law enforcement were stacked against us, this was, for a lot of people in San Francisco at that time, the last straw.
That verdict meant that it's okay to kill faggots still, even in San Francisco. If you want to call it a battle, call it that. I should say, though, that we didn't draw the lines. It was presented to us.
There was a huge demonstration outside City Hall, which turned into a riot. And as protesters chanted, "He got away with murder! He got away with murder!" People tried to smash their way into City Hall, and a whole bunch of police cars were set on fire. After which, San Francisco police went into the city's best-known gay neighborhood, the Castro, and started randomly beating people up. Now, that was the environment that CBS's producers walked into a few weeks later when they started researching and filming their documentary about gay political power and the upcoming San Francisco mayoral election. The show's bias was most evident in who it left out. Except for some rally scenes and crowd footage, CBS mostly edited or cropped everything to exclude women and people of color, which again meant excluding most of the community. In 1991, I interviewed the pioneering lesbian activists Del Martin and Phyllis Lyon, and they told me that one reason that women were barely in the 1980 show was that the few lesbians who were approached about it did not trust the producers. In fact, lots of people knew not to trust these folks. Del and Phil told me that at one point, the producers met with San Francisco Mayor Dianne Feinstein, and one of the first questions they asked her was, "How does it feel to be the mayor of Sodom and Gomorrah?" The mayor quickly realized they weren't interested in serious journalism, at least not in this documentary, and she told them to get the hell out of her office, which was not the sort of thing she generally did. And some of their questions should have raised red flags for the people who did trust them.
Isn't it a sign of decadence when you have so many gays emerging, breaking apart all of the values of a society?
One of the producers, Grace Deakhouse, later admitted on a local news show the main reason she excluded women from the documentary.
By no means was saying that the lesbian community is not a viable political force. It's just different from the gay men in terms of what we were trying to show was the political and the disturbing consequences of...
So if you wanted to show something that was disturbing, you couldn't show lesbians as
well. The one thing about
disturbing was your word, I believe.
Disturbing is my word, yes.
So the goal was for viewers to find gay people disturbing, and she felt that queer women's disturbingness was harder to capture on film. Many people in San Francisco felt let down by the show. Armistead Maupin, the author of the Tales of the City novels, had originally helped the producers, but later confronted them on local TV.
The people at home who want to lighten up at this point and get a little bit of a laugh out of this whole show might try picturing these two people, Grace and George, whom I considered friends of mine up until tonight, tiptoeing through Buena Vista Park, she in her Charles Jourdan shoes and he in his button-down blue shirt, two Upper East Side New York socialites, keeping their camera at crotch level for the entire afternoon, looking for naked men in the park. I mean, I've never seen anything so preposterous in my life. I live about a block from Coit Tower, and every night it's impossible for me to park my car because there are at least 20 straight couples up there having sex in the parking lot. And I wouldn't think of sending a camera up there to indicate anything about the way that heterosexuals live. George and Grace spent a lot of time talking to me and my roommate and some close friends of ours about our family structure, about how we try to support each other and to make a special life for ourselves in the city. And all of those hopes and dreams that we reflected were somehow or other lost. I mean, it never came through once in the documentary. And it was dropped on the basis of it being non-political, yet somehow or other these obscure S&M practices are felt to be relevant.
After the broadcast, various complaints were filed against the show with the National News Council alleging violations of journalistic ethics. The council ruled that CBS had indeed violated basic ethics by selectively reinforcing stereotypes and using, quote, misleading and deceitful editing. In the weeks after the show, a local anti-violence project documented a 400% increase in violent homophobic attacks in San Francisco, and various right-wing organizations used frame shots from the show in their campaigns to try and repeal non-discrimination laws around the country. Months after the broadcast, CBS eventually did air a 30-second semi-apology for this show, basically a non-apology for this show, buried at the end of a later CBS Reports program about Saudi Arabia.
But the News Council did find unfairness by CBS News in the presentation of 4 sexual issues, specifically the inclusion of segments on sadomasochism, the depiction of the Beaux-Arts Ball, a Halloween costume party, and a school demystification program. By concentrating on certain flamboyant types of homosexual behavior, the council said, the program tended to reinforce stereotypes. The complaint also accused CBS News of having inserted applause in response to a part of a speech when, in fact, no applause occurred at that point. CBS News acknowledged that the complaint was accurate in that respect and that the insertion of applause was contrary to its own journalistic standards. CBS News regrets that error.
Now, while it is absolutely true that CBS Reports did absolutely suck at reporting on queer lives, starting in the 1970s, other CBS News shows, the CBS Morning News, Evening News, 60 Minutes, did some surprisingly good, really interesting reporting on issues affecting or involving us, with much less of the prejudice that had defined the homosexuals and gay power, gay politics. If you want to know more about the history of LGBTQ+ images on American television, check out the hundreds of clips on my YouTube channel. And for more information on these 2 specials, check out the second edition of my book, Alternate Channels, Queer Images on 20th Century TV, which has a whole behind-the-scenes chapter about the homosexuals and devotes part of a chapter to gay power, gay politics.